Hello out there, and today we're going to be taking a look at a new release from Kizer Knives, and this is a design by Dirk Pinkerton, and it is called the Fire Ant. And first of all, guys, let me say thank you to the people at Kizer for sending this knife to our pass-around group for a number of reviewers to check out. I really appreciate that because this is one of those designs that I was very eager to get my hands on when I handled it at Blade Show 2019. And the reason why I was so excited is because it is extremely similar to a knife also from Dirk Pinkerton and Kizer that is one of my favorite EDC knives, period. And it is the Kizer Rogue. And as you can see, there is certainly a lot of family resemblance here, a lot of similarities in just the overall look and the lines of the knives. But today we're going to be talking about how these knives are different and doing a little bit of a comparison review and talking about my preference and who might want one over the other or vice versa. You know, there's a lot of already very positive reviews about this knife out here on YouTube, and in my perspective, even though I do think this is a very well executed knife and I completely endorse anyone picking it up who wants to get it, my perspective is a little bit different because I am just always going to be comparing it to another knife that I already like so much. So should be interesting as we go through the knife to talk about some of the differences, and if you are one of those people who is interested in the Rogue or maybe interested in one of the two of these and not sure which one to get, this really might be the video for you. So let's get into it and start with some of the basic specs of the knife, mainly the Fire Ant. So here with the Fire Ant, what we have is a cutting edge that is just over 2.5 inches, probably right around 2.6, 2.7 inches of S35 VN blade steel, and an overall length of 6.5 inches, maybe just a little bit under. So it is a little bit of a smaller knife. For size comparison, obviously you saw the Rogue already, but here's a Paramilitary 2, which dwarfs it. What else do I have here? The large Polar, maybe a little bit closer in size. But a really good size comparison is the Chris Reeve Small Inkosi. And we will actually get back to this knife and the comparison here when we talk about ergonomics, because the Kizer has something going for it that the Inkosi definitely does not. When it comes to weight, what we're looking at here is a very agreeable 2.69 ounces. And when you look at this knife, the width of it and how thick the titanium is for the size of the knife, and the fact that none of it is really milled on the interior, that's a pretty darn good weight. It's very nice. This knife has a good amount of sturdiness to the feel of it without being hefty. So that's definitely a very, very good thing. Looking at the Rogue, 3.77 ounces in comparison. And before we move further, I want to talk just a little bit more about the size, because one of the things that the Fire Ant has going for it when it comes to the size is just I'd say just a very beneficial kind of comparison to the Rogue. Not saying I prefer it, but when you look at these two knives next to each other, in my opinion, just the overall look of them, the Rogue dwarfs the Fire Ant. There's no question. But when we look at the particulars and the details of it, the overall length is really only about 2/3 of an inch longer with the Rogue versus the Fire Ant. And the cutting edge, if you're taking a look at that, I mean, it's about 1/4 of an inch. So what we have is a difference in height, a big difference in height that makes the Rogue dwarf the Fire Ant. But if you're looking at overall length and you need something that's lighter and smaller, but still, very strong and well built, I mean, the Fire Ant, I think proportionally has a lot going for it in that regard. Just very interesting, because just with the size of these, I would expect the weight to be very much more different, or the length to be very much more different, but no, it's sort of looks can be deceiving, because you still have not too much less cutting edge on the Fire Ant, so should be able to use it very similarly. Talking about the blade here, really do like this Wharncliffe. A big fan of this kind of style for EDC use. The S35VN is steel that Kizer uses all the time. They do it very well in my estimation, so I have no complaints there. The big difference between this and the Rogue in this regard is that the Rogue has a hollow grind while the Fire Ant is flat ground. And for me personally, I would prefer the flat grind, or excuse me, no, I would prefer the hollow grind. But I think with the Rogue, when we're looking at the thickness of the blade stock here, the hollow grind was just important to keep it from getting too thick, too thick down behind the edge and keep it usable and slicing. And I don't think that that's too big of an issue with the Fire Ant, so the flat grind should work pretty well considering that the blade stock, is a little bit thinner. The other thing, actually, while we have them next to each other, the other thing that's pretty different when we're talking about the blades is the jimping. So we have a lot of extra jimping on the Fire Ant, which is a very good thing. I like when there's a lot of jimping all the way down the spine. For me, it doesn't detract from any kind of like aesthetics. I just like the look of it. You could jump all the way down to the to the damn end if you wanted to. All right. Maybe the jimping is a little bit more rounded than I would like, but it does grip the thumb pretty well. And if you're holding the knife like far back, you have plenty of room to grip with it. And if you're choking up, even if you're going beyond the length of the jimping, right where your knuckle is, you can get good grip pushing down and a good amount of traction. With the Rogue, the big difference with the jimping is that, and you might be able to see this from here, as you're leaving the frame and getting to the spine of the knife, right? We have a downward slope from the frame to the spine on the Fire Ant and an upwards one on the Rogue. So for me, I would always prefer this just because I'm pushing upwards and it helps me lock in a little bit better. Is this a little sharper and is it not as long as on the Fire Ant? Sure. Do I prefer this though? I think so. Yeah, I think I do. I don't think that either set of jimping has any real negatives to it, but just as far as design preference goes, I prefer this kind of feel to it, pushing upwards instead of downwards. But again, that's just me. So as we continue to move on back, focusing more on the Fire Ant for just a bit, we do get to our titanium frame. The titanium frame here is, well, it's pretty simple. It's straightforward. It sort of has that basic Kizer look that you expect, and it's one of those things that when it comes to Kizer, it's something that I think they do really well, but all of their knives, not all of their knives, because obviously this one is an exception and they do have some exceptions, but this is just like the basic kind of Kizer look with no frills, and it has a good coating and a good feel to it. It isn't slick at all. So yeah, it is a good feeling amount of titanium, and it's thick as well, like I said earlier. The lockup on this knife is very good. Take a look at that. I really like the stainless steel interface. It's executed pretty much perfectly in my estimation. Could not complain a bit about that. As we move on back, you see we have the open frame. Only a couple body screws on each side holding together these standoffs. Good looking standoffs. A little bit of jimping on the top here and on the bottom, which could become useful depending on how you're holding the knife. And it's comfortable. It isn't sharp. The machining, even though there's nothing like too fancy when it comes to intricacies and details, the machining is very good all the way throughout this knife. And then when we get to the pocket clip, and comparing it to the Rogue, the Fire Ant's definitely going to have a big win here. So the Rogue, if you're not familiar, has this goofy looking kind of loop over clip. It doesn't really go with the theme of the rest of the knife. It just is sort of there. I know they've updated this clip for later incarnations of the Rogue, but it still just has never been quite perfect. This is a milled clip. I do like the way that this is executed. A little bit of real estate poking out, especially as the butt of the knife comes to this point. But overall, it's very agreeable. It is not reversible, though, so definitely something to keep in mind there. Talking about ergonomics before we get into action, one of the things that I really like about this knife, about the Fire Ant, is that it holds in the hand better than a knife of its size usually would. So the Rogue for me is extremely comfortable. It's pretty much perfect. Zero issues whatsoever. I love all these little ridges here for points of contact, all that good stuff. And you would think that with a knife considerably smaller in the Fire Ant, that you would lose some of that you would lose some of that comfort, you would lose some of the ergonomic value there. And, while it does feel smaller, don't get me wrong, it fits in the hand for me really nicely. You can see all 4 of my fingers fit on it comfortably. If you have larger hands than mine, which most likely you do, might not be quite as comfortable, but still, I think for a knife of its size, it is very, very good in the hand. And the comparison, and getting back to the small and Nkosi, the comparison I want to make is if you have this size comparison and these two knives, which are pretty much the same length overall, just the way that the handles are set up on these two knives, it's a glaring difference. And while I think that the Nkosi is pretty good in hand, I can't get all 4 fingers on this knife comfortably. I'm sliding off. And so what I think, and that's just one comparison, but what I think is that this knife was really well thought out when it comes to being a small knife having stature that someone could actually get a grip on and use. It seems to me more than a lot of, not Kizers, but a lot of knives, it seems to be one that's really designed for use and for being able to get in the hand and be comfortable while you're actively cutting. Okay, so the last couple things to talk about is just action, I guess, and then some overall kind of feel and opinion about the knife. So the action on this knife is agreeable. It's not great. It's not terrible. The opening action, that's satisfying. I love a good manual thumb stud, so I'm not going to complain about that at all. So here we have that. So spider flick. So yeah, it's pretty smooth. I think we are running on just washers. And, that's fine. The same as the first Rogue. But this knife isn't going to drop shut or anything. And the detent is a little bit soft. Not going to shake out. Do the off-camera shakeout test. It passes. but yeah, this isn't one of those knives that you're going to get to really drop shut. Maybe you could lubricate it to that point and really clean it up, but for me, since it's not mine, I'm not even going to try to go there. But it doesn't seem like it's that kind of knife, and it doesn't seem like that's where the focus is in designing it. So it's perfectly fine. Still very functional and no issues with it. Not like there's a lot of friction or anything really all that negative. All right. So overall, who's this knife for? And what do I think of it? I really like the knife, guys. For me, the only thing that's underwhelming is the fact that I prefer the Rogue, and there really wasn't a question that I would. So, so it's a little bit tough to make an endorsement saying, hey, pick up this over this when, I think that for me, the Rogue is just the one that I prefer. Now, if you're looking at overall lengths and you're looking at legality, or you're looking at, hey, maybe I want something that's really slim and lighter in the pocket, but still very usable. I know that there are going to be plenty of people who are going to see the appeal in this knife over the Rogue. We're looking at $119 on this versus $125 for the Rogue. So really, the price being negligible, the materials, the steel being the same, it's just a matter of choices. And what I like is that we have that option now. I almost would have called this, and it is a different design, so you couldn't call it like the mini Rogue, but I would have liked to have seen maybe like some cross-marketing, meaning like making the Fire Ant part of the Rogue family and having like a family of knives, and sort of bringing more attention to the Rogue and sort of focusing on that option between the two of them in Kizer's catalog. The thing that I thought of immediately when I saw this knife, and I knew that it was different from the Rogue, but still so similar that it couldn't be ignored, was when Benchmade came out with a knife called the Volley, which was definitely a take on the Barrage, but it was very different from the Barrage in that it was thin, it had G10, but the blade shape was a Barrage, that Volley. And they called it part of the Barrage family, even though it wasn't a barrage. And I really like how they like marketed it that way and sort of gave you another option and group them together. And I'd like to see Kizer do something like that, just because I think that if you're looking at this knife and you're not aware of the Rogue, you might just miss out, you know, and you might just pick a knife that maybe isn't as right for you as you'd want it to be. But otherwise, guys, when it comes to the knife itself, it's great. It's executed really well. It's going to provide a good option for people who, like I said, just want something maybe a little bit different. For me, I'm more than content to stick with my Rogue. I think this is an excellent knife, but either way, whichever one of these that you're looking at and thinking, I would really prefer this one, I think you're going to get a good knife at about the same price, and can't really complain too much about that, guys. So any questions, comments, complaint, suggestions, let me know down below. What do you think? Which one is your preferred between the Rogue and the Fire Ant? All right, guys, I appreciate you watching. I will talk with you soon. Take care and have a good one.